to another edition of the Campaign Diary and Q&A here on Slice and Dice, talking about the Many Lands campaign. And today, going to be talking about session 18, which we just had on Monday, otherwise known as Of Wolves and Leads, which is now up on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it already and you'd like to see it at your leisure, check it out on our YouTube channel. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so on our YouTube channel. That way you'll be notified every time I put a new video up there, just like this one. So yes, thanks in advance for that. For those of you who have followed the channel, a massive thank you, particularly our newest followers on Twitch. So just looking at the list here, Sparrow on Deck and CF and Co. Guys, thank you so much for following. Appreciate that a lot. Now, one of the reasons you may well be subscribing and following the channel and things like that at the moment is because we have a giveaway on the go at the moment. That's right, it's for to win this lovely set of dice that I've packed away in here. There's pictures of it all over our social media. These lovely blue, kind of got this heavenly quality light blue sparkly dice, which is all thanks to our friends at Beholder's Gaze. We're running a competition with them at the moment, which you could be in with a chance of winning that set of dice, along with this art here of this celestial figure. This is artwork by Alan Childers, that's an artist there, and you've got some stickers and other goodies, all from Beholder's Gaze. They're running a kind of Angels versus Demons theme at the moment on their store. If you want to peruse the entire selection of stock that Beholder's Gaze have for us, they're a UK-based company. We want to support them as much as possible. Click on the link just on our Twitch page under competitions. It's like literally at the top, just underneath the video is the link to that. Just click on the picture, it'll take you to their store and you can have a look at all their fine wares. But as I said, if you want to be in the chance of winning the dice and all the other goodies, all you got to do is follow us here on the channel and write in the chat with the word Beholder. If you're following us on social media, and I suggest you do, you can also enter throughout the week. All you have to do is like and retweet and follow us. So like and follow us for all of the social media, retweet if you're on Twitter, share if you're on Facebook, and on Instagram, just liking and following us is enough to enter. So that's all you got to do to be entered into the competition this time, and then we'll be announcing the winner on the channel live here on Monday, just after 6 p.m, which is when we're due to start. That's Greenwich Mean Time for any of you watching from further afield. So come join us for that Monday, 6 p.m. here on the channel, and we'll announce live who the winner of the competition is before getting stuck in with the session for today. And we've left things in quite an interesting position going into next week, but we shall dive more into that. Let's go sequentially through everything that happened in this week's episode. Over to my great book. So, one of the first things that, of course, aside from the giveaway that we started on Monday, was also that we finally had our first ever guest star on the channel, and during the stream, it was really good fun to have Midge on board, and I think you'll agree if you've watched it. I think he did a darn fine job. So he did a damn fine good job. It were real good, that. So we did enjoy that. And you'll be seeing more of him next week with his character Howland Cragmere, along with his daughter Lainey, which I obviously have to play, being that it's an NPC. Lots of good stuff with him getting involved, but we'll get to him as he comes into the episode a bit later on, where we pick things up with our heroes this week. So they had just overcome the pack of wolves inside Half-Light Forest, which they've been following a trail to try and find Dean Fringe, the courier, who seemed to have come into a lot of money through selling his ox and cart to a passing group of adventurers with a statue, which to our heroes sounds very familiar because they're on the trail of a group of heroes, or anti-heroes you could say, who have kidnapped the Lady Helene Grenforth after having her turned to stone by petrification when they led her to the Basilisk Cave, which our heroes came across some time ago. So they've been on the trail trying to find Lady Helene, along with the dwarves Tinan and Turin, the two bodyguards who were assigned to protect her, and they obviously didn't do a great job about that, and they haven't done a great job at tracking her down either, as it takes them at least 2 days before they figure out that there might be a lead in Hilberg, and it's actually Turin, the famously less intelligent member of the two, who ends up finding the lead that has led our heroes into the forest. So after defeating the wolves, so quite characterful from Seth, James, who plays Seth, because the wolves had been put to sleep, including their leader, the direwolf. Half of them have been slaughtered, the other half have been put to sleep along with Brucon, and instead of just gathering up their possessions and heading on their way, he decided that he'd rather just kill off the wolves straight away. He's had a checkered past with dogs and wolves, so it made complete sense for the character for him to do that. It was good fun for the rest of us as well to see what was going on there. He seems to be, I guess, because out of all the characters, he is one of the more serious, like angsty characters. That he's then acts as a foil to some of the more playful members of the group, and you can see that demonstrated massively. So I'll move this up a little bit. You can see that demonstrated massively with the relationship between Seth and Fleeting Look. Fleeting Look being quite an off-the-wall, very comedic character, but in a kind of perverse and slightly off-the-wall way that catches everyone off guard. He remains very quiet for a lot of time, and then jumps in with these one-liners occasionally, which causes hilarity, I think, for the players more so than they do for the characters. Whereas Seth is a lot more serious, a lot more a man of action, and just kind of straight down the line wants to get this done. I've got a plan, let's do this. Sometimes kind of acts as almost as a leader for the group, but we see that changes from time to time in the group dynamic. So anyway, whilst he's murdering wolves that are defenseless and asleep, Malar is in front of this pile of clothes. Now, it matches the description that they had heard for Dean Fringe, and sure enough, amongst that pile of clothes, he finds a ring of feather falling, which is one of the magical items which it was reported that that Dean Fringe had bought not very long ago, in fact a day or so ago, from the general store in Hilberg. So, a hot lead there. And it's funny because in the previous episode, it was, I think it was Seth actually who then said to Rexland Swordclaw, who had warned the group about a werewolf being apparently on the loose around Hilberg. He basically decided to put the two plot lines together, or should I say, as Bart said, plot-welding, I think was the term. Managed to kind of put those two plot points together. So they were looking for a courier, and apparently there's a werewolf in the loose. Then said to Rexline, well, apparently this werewolf is also the courier and knows where the person we're looking for is. So like a genius way to try and convince this obviously quite capable paladin to come and join the party on their excursion, but also but also weirdly was true. So it seems. So they called it. He called that ahead of time, but I think completely by accident. But it's just funny how things work out, really. So after finding this ring and murdering the wolves, it's then decided after some discussion that the best place for the group then to go is to the farm, because that is where the attacks have happened before on the sheep. And they may be able to find more clues there as to where the wolf is now, unless the wolf has actually already gone there. So they make a beeline for the farm, head on over there, and there's another chance for me to come to introduce a new character, being the farmer. They didn't get the name other than his wife is called Giselle Shepherd, so this is Mr. Shepherd, but they didn't get his first name. Who I was kind of going for the hot fuzz kind of West Country but gruff accent with a very bushy beard that you can't really. It's so thick, the accent, and also sort of then compounded by the beard, possibly some full missing teeth and that sort of thing, that basically his speech isn't particularly great, so it's quite hard to discern exactly what he's saying. He's not the most eloquent of people, and I think it made for an interesting discussion, because it was in some ways for the players harder than having a character who speaks in a language they don't understand, because they are speaking your language, it's just hard to discern what they're saying. So it was a nice little kind of flavour moment there. I definitely I definitely had fun doing it. I know some of the players did too. Perhaps some, not all of them, but most of them. So anyway, from speaking to the farmer, they eventually find out from him that it's the sheep around the place have been torn apart, and although he has some sheep left which are out grazing in the field, the carcasses of most of the dead ones have been put in the barn. And the idea was basically that they could go in there, they could investigate, they could look for signs, just to confirm that this is the wolf, and that. And not only that, that it might not be a normal sized wolf, it'd be a werewolf. But they kind of already had that information. So the only other thing that they could have done, which they actually didn't do, was to look for tracks, to look for werewolf prints around the farm and around the field, just with a survival check. Because if they had, they may have gone on a different course of action to what in fact happened. Now, during this time, because the pace had slowed down a little bit when they were in the barn, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring in our second ever fake dice roll, which immediately puts the players on their toes and immediately gets them to pay attention, like, oh god, what's going to happen now? Just so happened it was something actually very harmless, but also typically quite comedic. And that was having woodland creatures kind of descend and perch on the players' shoulders and start singing, and that they would be perched on their shoulders and making a load of noise, even if they're trying to stealth specifically. So whilst with his new abilities, Leobrin had predicted the weather, had foretold what the weather would be for the next 24 hours and had known that it was going to rain. Whilst it was raining and there was a thunderstorm, we had these woodland creatures like birds, a robin, and had some a squirrel and a bat and things like that, all just perched on the players and singing whilst they're trying to do something quite serious. Because in fact, whilst they were in the barn, to kind of expedite the process a little bit, because they were getting a little bit sidetracked there, and I wanted to introduce our guest star, they hear a scream from within Hilberg, and from within the town. So they immediately make a beeline to get back there. They peg it there as fast as they can, and then on entering the gates, they then find a whole crowd of people, most of them from the market, just a real sort of mass of people, like a school of fish. Just a wave comes over the party, knocking them out of the way. Meaning it actually it was a nice opportunity to bring in a skill check, and just I think skill checks are doing a kind of skill challenge, should I say. It's a really nice way of going about a situation that happens in quite a short amount of time physically, but like kind of changes up the action from just exploration and combat. It's like this nice kind of halfway house where there is a time element to it. The players make their checks, and we see what happens as a consequence of that. And so what happened was that some of them managed to wade their way through the crowds, and I even asked them what ability they like to use, just to kind of, it's a nice way of giving your players that flexibility that they can then go, well, what would my character do to get over this situation? And it kind of invites the opportunity for maybe some slightly lateral thinking or some slightly kind of different approaches to the situation. Of course, with those with high strength or dexterity, they went, well, I'm gonna push my way through with athletics, or I'm gonna kind of nimbly jump and dodge my way around the crowd using acrobatics. We saw a couple of other interesting takes on the situation. But what ended up happening was that Leobrin and Brucon, surprisingly, being that he is one of the most nimble of the group, ends up getting pushed back by the crowds. And so basically it staggers their entry to the market square where the werewolf encounter happens. And when they arrive there, those who actually get there ahead of the crowd, gets away from the crowds, they then witness this werewolf standing over the carcass of what is later revealed to just be one of the Fairfan cultists. Now, I imagine the players didn't really think much of that it's one of the cultists. They're not exactly, they don't seem particularly good, and they'll be missed. But in fact, the only reason that there is now a cultist lying dead is because the group, and I think particularly Seth actually, had convinced these cultists to aid them in looking for this courier and for Lady Helene. They've been convinced into going out and helping against their will. They really didn't want to help, and so there may well be repercussions because of that. Because if it wasn't for our heroes, they would still be in the inn and they'd all still be alive. There wouldn't be one of them just there, mutilated and dead, bleeding out in the middle of the market square. So we shall see what happens with that in the future. But anyway, back to this episode. So when the group then encounter this werewolf, admittedly, I made a bit of a mistake when I was reading it, and I saw damage immunity as damage resistance. So I then ended up having to compensate and then beefing up the werewolf's hit points, because I was like, well, these guys are getting through this quite quickly. This is supposed to be challenge rating 3. Like, what's going on? It was basically just because I completely misread in the moment that it was damage immunity to non-magical and non-silvered attacks, not damage resistance, which is what I thought it was. Anyway, typically, and now, as this is the third time this has happened, when the encounter starts, Seth hears this, "Alert! Danger! Alert!" As he basically figured out, this was emanating from his ring of alertness. So whilst on the one hand it gives him a bonus to his passive perception and passive investigation, I believe, it also has the opposite and cursed effect that whenever he comes into danger that he can perceive within 50 feet of him, the ring shouts out, which gives away, as a rogue, is particularly harsh, because it means that he can't sneak up on people, because as soon as he gets within 50 feet of them and they're hostile, that's going to go off. So given that one of the rogue's main things is to kind of as a glass cannon is to kind of get in there, attack, and then get out again, that really inhibits that, because hiding's very difficult with that ring. So that in fact was a cursed item, and he had to attune to it as well. So once, we shall see what happens when he gets rid of it. Let's just put it that way. It might not be as straightforward as you may think. So as they begin to fight this werewolf, meanwhile we cut over to elsewhere in the town, and in fact just above where the action is taking place, up the hill, is where the Grand Council Chamber is. It's the biggest building within the town. It's located pretty much in the centre, and its position being on the edge of the quarried part of the hill means that it can oversee the kind of the lower level of the town, with its back to the more sort of high end. There's a double meaning there, high end part of the town. So it gets a kind of a good 360 degree view, essentially, because there's windows around the back, around the side. So it's a optimal location to have the council chambers. And meeting here, as would be suggested with the grandest building in town, are the most important people in the town. And so what it was that the councillor Tarquin Potter, who is sort of the de facto ruler of town, because a little bit on Burekran here. So Burekran is a republic, and the basic hierarchy, if you like, with politics and power, is that they have a central senate, which is located in Rundar, and that's, if you like, kind of like equivalent to the Houses of Parliament. Or the Roman Senate would be also a great example. Anyway, so in the Senate is where all the senators meet. The senators are essentially like MPs. They are elected to represent their constituents, represent the people. But below them, they have the governors. The governors are So the senators are the kind of elite. They're like, I guess, to use a UK equivalent would be the senators, essentially the cabinet, whereas the governors also have votes. They're also kind of MPs. They're there and they get a vote and they get to help decide on laws, but they don't get to create laws. The senators are allowed to create laws. So the governors are then directly come from these particular settlements. So, for instance, as it was said in the episode, that actually the council chamber for Hilberg is actually governed by Governor Henley. Now, the problem with the reason why the councillor is in charge, and in fact this is the case in most settlements in Burekrin, is because the governors are generally called away to the Senate for most of the year. They don't actually, they're kind of detached from they're quite detached, in fact, from their original constituents. And I think that I thought this would be an interesting dynamic, and it kind of reflects the way that people feel that the politics in their own countries can be, that the with democracy and republics, that it can feel like they're not actually being represented because the person who's supposed to represent them is always in this kind of bubble in the capital. So they then have the councillors who are below the governors. They work directly for their governors. The councillors do not get votes in the Senate, and in fact that's why they're generally not there, because there's no real reason for them to be. There can be more than one councillor in a particular settlement, but generally there is one who is kind of I guess the vice president. They are in charge of the settlement while the governor is away, and so they take care of a lot of the admin, a lot of they essentially represent the governor at any at kind of constituent level, at boots on the ground level, and so they have to take care of the more mundane stuff, but they're also having to run the more important decisions past their governor. So their hands are kind of tied. So it's a kind of middle management position. It's not great fun to be in, but it's the only position of authority left in the different settlements throughout Burekrin. So that's the basics of the hierarchy of power within the Burekrin Republic. So anyway, so Councillor Tarquin Potter is being met by Lord Gant Bron. He is a rather young lord from the Crowflies, and he represents House Bron, which is one of the three major houses. This may sound familiar to you because Lady Helene Grenforth also is from one of the three main houses of the Crowflies, from House Grenforth. The only other major house, because there are three, is House Rookwood, of which we have not met any of their representatives yet, although we have found vassal houses or vassal houses who we found members of those houses dead, who appear to have been, who it would seem are behind the abduction of Lady Helene Grenforth. They seem to be, it would appear that they are working for the Rookwoods because that is their vassal house. So the fact that they've been found in Burekrin, dead, whilst being linked to the abduction of Lady Helene seems all the more suspicious. So the Lord Bron was meeting Councillor Potter at Hilberg, and the reason for that hasn't been revealed yet. I don't want to give too much away about it, but what I will say is that Lord Gant Bron is going to be an important figure for the next session or so. In fact, to be kind of driving the plot forward in a sense as well. Read into that what you will. But accompanying him to this meeting in Hilberg was his bodyguard, our new PC, our guest star Midge, as Howland Cragmere of House Cragmere, along with his squire, his daughter Lainey, a sort of teenage daughter who's also taken up the shield. Now, the history of House Cragmere is essentially that they are a vassal house of House Bron. They are sworn to protect them, and in fact, Lord Howland Cragmere is a shield of Bron. The shields of Bron are a very small order that they have some reverence within the Crowflies due to their deeds historically, and just basically known to be good fighters and protectors, and that's essentially their role. They are there to protect House Bron. And they're sworn to protect. They're sworn to do that. So that, of course, that's why Howland has accompanied Lord Gant on his travels down to Burekrin. But they're quite different characters. Lord Gant is actually he does some shady feelings. He's the third born of House Bronn, and he essentially is a spy master. He looks to acquire information and knowledge rather than wealth necessarily. But he's also represents House Bronn and wants to further their goals, whatever they may be. So he's in Burikrin, trying to network, trying to kind of get some eyes, get a spy within the Republic to kind of know more about what the Republic is doing, for reasons we don't yet know. And upon hearing this, the caterwauling and the kind of the fracas that's going on below, as well as the werewolf howl and the scream, of course, leads Howland to heroically dash in and down the stairs and try and get to the market square to help in the combat. By the time he actually got to them, I think the werewolf was pretty much done. But not before he could do a sort of lair action and call on a couple of wolves to come and assist him, giving another challenge to the party, which they managed to overcome, although touch and go, because Seth did go down, got knocked unconscious. I think he was the only one, though, in this particular combat, but it does seem to happen to him quite a bit. Not that I'm not picking on him, these things just happen. Anyway, they managed to overcome the odds, and I think it was Leobrin actually who got the last hit on Dean Fringe. No, apologies. It was Fleeting Look with Fair's Storm, the Warhammer, casting Thunderwave, pushed Dean Fringe, the werewolf, away, like broke his neck. And immediately after dying, he transforms back into his natural form. So he transforms back into his human form. They don't know what Dean Fringe looks like. They've been given a sort of description, and he seems to match that. Rather dirty, kind of mangy hair, looking rather rough in general, and now without any clothes, completely naked. So it seemed like the trail for Lady Helene had kind of died with Dean, because they had wanted to take him in rather than kill him. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But Malar had a plan and immediately he was going to immediately take him there, but then there was some more discussion introducing Howland Cragmere and so on. But Malar decided to take Dean's body to the Temple of the Eight and ask the priest Ventrix there to help him to use a Speak with Dead scroll or similar, so that he may be able to talk to the corpse of Dean Fringe and see if he can get any more information about the men who bought the cart from him, because that will lead them to Lady Helene. If he knows where they were going, things like that, that will give them a lead. And that is, for Malar particularly, that is his main goal at the moment, is to track her down. So some canny thinking from DK there to do that, because otherwise, if they basically didn't have a cleric in the party, they would be a little bit screwed with that. Or in fact, if they hadn't spoken to, if they didn't have somebody who would be on good terms with Priest Ventrix, because Malar is a deacon himself, he's a man of the cloth, from the same order as Ventrix, that gives them an in straight away. So that worked in their favour, definitely. And so they've agreed in the morning to use this scroll so that they may get some more information from him. But before that, they wanted to pursue some more leads. And once they'd filled in Howland Cragmere and what they were doing and about Lady Helene's abduction, because they'd recognised his crest and they didn't know exactly which house he was from or whatever, but they recognised with a coat of arms, yeah, he's going to be from the Crowflies, probably somebody we should talk to about this. Also mentioning one of the other coats of arms they'd come across, the one on the spell book of one of the corpses from earlier on, which in fact was one of these houses that I've mentioned. Now, Howland reported back to Lord Gant about what had transpired and filled him in on the situation with Lady Helene, which is an interesting move, because what will Lord Gant do with this information? Will he use it for his own ends, or will he use it to do good? Who knows? But it's interesting because when Howland asked if he recognised the coat of arms, recognised what house that was from, Gant just said, "Yeah, yes, I do," but didn't say who it was. So he's kind of keeping his cards close to his chest. So we'll see what develops with that going forward, where that information will or will not go. So while he was doing that, Seth decided that he could pursue his own lead, which was essentially a meeting of the Moonrunners, which are due to meet at midnight at the mill. And after talking with the rest of the group in the inn, Howland and his daughter Lainey are offered accommodation in the inn by Lord Gant. Apparently it's already been booked. So he goes over and joins the group as well. Seth then decides that as this is a clandestine, very secretive organisation that only meets in the middle of the night out by the mill, that he should bring the rest of the party with him to the meeting. Of course, he'd been invited to the meeting. The rest of them hadn't. And I did ask when they were heading towards the mill, once they figured out where it was, whether they just wanted to just walk there, or whether they're going to try and be sneaky and stealth their way there. And they went, no, just gonna head on over there. This further proved to be difficult when they realised this is midnight. Howland and Malar can't see in the dark, so you're gonna need a light source, and probably should keep them further behind if we're trying to, rock up there without being too conspicuous for a clandestine crew. So the two of them ended up being left behind outside to kind of watch some distance from the mill, which left only three of them. Only left Leobrin, Seth, and Brucon to explore the mill. And when they got there, nobody's there. The door's locked. All very suspicious. They try to throw their grappling hooks up to the roof. That doesn't work. It's bad rolling otherwise. There may have been a very, very difficult point of entry through the kind of the windmill, but other than that, at the top, there's not really a lot of entry points up there. But anyway, we'll see what they would have done if that were the case. We'll never know. Instead, when Seth fluffed his roll for picking the lock to the door, ends up with Brucon power fisting his way through, breaking through the door, and then them kind of having to squeeze inside. And then once inside, there appears to be a normal grain store. There's nobody there, and Seth was wondering, well, what's going on here? I was supposed to meet them here. Where are they? And that was when I kind of spilled the beans a little bit to James, being like, well, were you told to bring everyone with you? Because if you're going to one of these meetings, like under cover of darkness, with a group that prides themselves on being secretive, you're not supposed to tell everyone about it. I think Bart was saying it in the session as well. It's like Fight Club. The first rule about Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. So the first thing Seth has done is told everyone about it. So that doesn't really warrant a lot of trust from this group, that he's kind of been informed about this meeting and then brought everyone with him. So yeah, we'll see how that develops. But essentially, they got there. They only left behind Fleeting Look and Laney back at the inn, which will be interesting because Dan's back next week, I believe, and so he's going to have the first part of the game being sat out on the bench, not being able to do anything. But as they explore the rest of the grain store, they find a trapdoor. Again, this is locked, but this time, because Leobrin has Detect Magic on tap, also notices that there's abjuration magic around from behind the trapdoor. What could this be? Well, have a look at abjuration magic and see what it would be. But I think it'd be quite obvious. It might be one of the first spells in the book, perhaps, in the player's handbook, if you have a look at spells, perhaps. Anyway, they again on Seth not being able to break through the lock, and it's a very difficult lock because, bearing in mind, these are essentially thieves. You're trying to break into a thieves guild's trapdoor. Like, they're good at lock picking, and therefore, if you're good at lock picking, you also know how to make a lock difficult to crack, and that's exactly what they've done with this trapdoor. Because, well, there may well be some valuable stuff below it. So again, they resort to Brucon power punching his way, trying to get through it. But before they can get through it, and it seems like it's fruitless and not going anywhere by punching into this thing. It doesn't seem to be moving. Just when they're about to give up, they feel an aura come over them as a sleep spell is cast. They're not sure who, where this. They know it's somebody in the mill with them. They don't know where they are, but they felt this effect come over them, and only because Leobrin and Seth are half-elves and therefore can't be put to sleep by magic, they aren't affected by the spell. And then Brucon, because of how many hit points he had, actually rolled one less than his total hit points. He wasn't put to sleep either. So a waste of a spell really for that character, but also alerted them to the danger. And outside, I've kind of foreshadowed and said to that Malar and Howland, they notice one figure approaching the mill, like a shadowy figure that they don't see properly from where they are, just start to go enter the mill that way. So basically, it's all the pawns are in place. It's about to kick off with an interesting combat, perhaps not a deadly combat, not one, because it may well be that I would say their attackers aren't really looking to kill these guys. They're just looking to remove them from the situation. So we'll see how that goes on Monday. One last thing, actually, I forgot to say. One more thing that was observed by the group, and it was a very fair point made, actually, was that when they were taking on the werewolf, that entire time, no guards showed up. None of the Hilberg guard. And so for those of you who are wondering, I'll answer that for you now. The reason why the guard didn't really show up with this werewolf on the loose was because, for one thing, the guards have taken a while to mobilise themselves anyway, because this threat only happened quite briefly. It only happened in a short space of time. They were also trying to contend with the crowd that was sort of trying to swarm and push their way through the gate, which could obviously cause harm to the citizens. If any of them fell down, they could get crushed by the mob. There's not many guards anyway at Hilberg, and that's a theme with most of the settlements throughout Björkren, with the exception of some of the major cities, because most of the extraneous troops have all been moved to the border between Björkren and Richir, along the mountainous borders there, because of this Cold War that's happening between the two. So there's a lot of guard stations on the border. They've kind of been relocated from the settlements, and that's exactly why Hilberg is short of guards itself. It probably has a garrison of 10 to 20, so not a massive amount of guards. For a town of its size, that's really not a lot. But they did, eventually the guards did get their way to the encounter, but by that time the werewolf had died. And that's, I guess, the last thing to remember is, although it seems like a long time, because combat naturally in D&D with all the dice rolls can take quite some time, it actually, each round is supposedly only 6 seconds in real time. So when you consider it like that, the group were probably fighting the wolf for the best part of a minute. Maybe, I think, just under, I would say under a minute. So 30 seconds, between 30 seconds and a minute, which isn't a great deal of time to get across town with the guard to fight this foe, to mobilise, so and coordinate them, of course. So with all those factors in mind, I guess it can be understood why they couldn't get there in time for the fight. Also, don't want them stealing the XP from the players. That's no fun. But they did eventually get to the werewolf after the combat had happened, and our players met the first senior ranking member of the Hilberg Guard, and that is the second in command, that is Lieutenant Asim Devilblight. He's although it was a serious circumstance they met him in, generally a lot more jovial, kind of quite a flirty character, and I look forward to him interacting with the players later on in the campaign. As I think he's a fun character. I certainly have written down. I've got some good little bits lined up with him. So I hope that he delivers for the party when they next encounter him. Anyway, so leaving things for next time. The group have been beset by apparently an unknown force, although we can imagine this is most likely somebody from the Moonrunners. What will happen next? I will tell you one thing: there may well be some trickery involved, where there's thieves, where there's arcane tricksters, and where there's arcane tricksters, there's illusions and enchantments. So that should be fun. So look forward to more of that here on the channel on Monday. And of course, as I said at the beginning, it's gonna be time to announce the winner of our competition. So if you have any time between now and Monday, get in touch via our socials. So that's follow us, like, and then retweet if you're on Twitter, or share if you're on Facebook, the posts about those dice, and you'll be entered in the draw with a chance to win. The cut-off point for entries is midnight Sunday. That's midnight Sunday GMT. So get those entries in now to avoid disappointment. Anyway, as I said, come and join me and the rest of the guys here on the stream from Monday at 6 p.m. for the next edition, and let's see if they can get themselves out of the mill intact. Until next time, guys, stay safe.